Tonight, when the sun goes down and your apartment gets quiet, you're going to do something your brain has been doing for 200,000 years. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to lose consciousness. And then, without any warning, you're going to be somewhere else entirely, running through a place that doesn't exist, talking to someone who died years ago, falling from a height you can't measure. And then, you'll jolt awake, stare at the ceiling, and within 30 seconds, most of it will be gone. You've done this 10,000 times. You don't think about it. But 130,000 years ago, a human being lay down on the ground, closed their eyes, and experienced the exact same thing. Same neurons, same firing patterns, same chemical cocktail in the dark. And they had no word for it, no framework, no one to explain what just happened to their mind. Here's what most people assume. It must have terrified them. Primitive minds, primitive fears. The unknown was everywhere. A dream was just one more thing to be afraid of. That assumption was wrong. Very wrong. The evidence doesn't show terror. It shows something far more surprising. It shows that ancient humans took dreams seriously, organized their lives around them, and built the oldest idea in human history out of what happened when they closed their eyes. In 1997, paleontologist Juan Luis Arsuaga and his team were working inside the Atapuerca cave system in northern Spain. Deep in a chamber called Sima de los Huesos, the pit of bones, they found something that stopped them cold. The skeletal remains of 33 individuals stacked and deposited at the bottom of a 14-meter shaft, not randomly scattered, deliberately placed, carried there with effort in near total darkness, and dropped into a hole in the earth. Among the bones, a single object, a hand axe carved from red quartzite, now known as Excalibur. These were Homo heidelbergensis, not modern humans, not Neanderthals, an earlier species, 430,000 years old, and they were performing the oldest known ritual burial on Earth. To bury your dead, you have to believe death is a transition, not a stop. You have to believe that the person who was here is now somewhere else. And the only first-hand experience any human brain ever had of consciousness going somewhere else and coming back, intact, vivid, and completely convincing, was the dream. Think about what that means if you have no other framework. You fall asleep next to a fire. You wake up in a forest you've never visited, speaking to a man who died in the winter. The experience is indistinguishable from reality. You felt the ground, you heard his voice. From the inside, you went somewhere, and then you came back. The pit of bones is not a grave, it is a door, and the people who built it believed they knew where the dead were going because they went there themselves every night. The hand axe placed among the bodies wasn't a tool. It was a provision for the journey. David Lewis Williams spent 30 years noticing that something was wrong with the way we explained cave art. He was emeritus professor at the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, and in 2002 he published a book called The Mind in the Cave that changed the conversation permanently. The images in ancient rock art weren't random. They weren't hunting records or maps or decoration. Across tens of thousands of years of separation, across the Drakensberg Mountains, the caves of southern France, the rock faces of the American Southwest, the same visual forms kept appearing. Dots arranged in grids, nested curves, spirals and zigzags. And then, emerging from those geometric shapes, animals, hybrid creatures, figures that were half human, half beast, bodies melting into stone walls. Lewis Williams recognized these patterns. They are entoptic phenomena, visual hallucinations generated by the human nervous system itself, with no external stimulus required. The same forms appear in clinical studies of people in hypnagogic states, which is the threshold between waking and sleep. They appear in high-grade fevers, in sensory deprivation, in REM sleep. The nervous system, under certain conditions, projects light onto the dark field of closed eyes. And the patterns it generates are not random. They're structured, and they are universal, because everyone on Earth runs the same hardware. The ancient artists were not imagining. They were recording. In the Chauvet Cave in southern France, painted 36,000 years ago, there is a figure called a therianthrope, half human, half bison, upright, arms at its sides, standing on the wall as if it stepped there itself. It is not a monster from a story. It is a portrait of what someone looked like when they left their body, went somewhere else, and looked back at themselves. Ancient humans did not separate the dream state from the trance state, because from the inside they cannot be separated. The chemistry is almost identical. The visual content is almost identical. What happens when you slip towards sleep, and what happens in a deep fever, and what happens in a ritual fast are all variations of the same neurological event. The paintings on those cave walls are the first recorded reports of where consciousness goes when it leaves the body. They are detailed. They are consistent across continents and millennia, and they match almost exactly what modern brain scans show happening during REM sleep. Here's what nobody talks about. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiessner at the University of Utah published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. She had spent 30 years working with the Ju/hoansi, a hunter-gatherer society in the Kalahari Desert of southern Africa, whose way of life had remained broadly consistent for tens of thousands of years. Over that time, she tracked the content of their conversations. What people talked about during the day. What they talked about after dark. By firelight. During daylight hours, about 6% of conversations were stories. Practical talk dominated. Food, tools, tasks, disputes. After dark by the fire, 81% of conversations were storytelling. And inside that storytelling, a disproportionate amount of time was spent on dreams, on what happened in the night, on messages from people who had died, on what the ancestors were doing now in the place they had gone. Wiessner argued that controlled fire, which ancient humans had been using for at least 400,000 years, extended the social day by 2 to 3 hours. It gave people time they didn't have in daylight to process the interior life, to narrate it to witnesses, to collectively decide what it meant. You do this too. You know you do. You wake up from something vivid, and the first thing you want to do is tell someone. You say it over breakfast. You text it before the memory fades. The impulse to report the dream, to bring it out of the dark and hand it to another person, is not a modern habit. It is not a quirk. It is a behavior old enough that it may have shaped language itself. We may have needed words for the dream before we needed words for almost anything else. Matthew Walker, neuroscientist at the University of California, Berkeley, found in research published in 2017 that REM sleep does not simply replay experiences. It edits them. Specifically, it strips the emotional charge from difficult memories. The thing that was unbearable at midnight is manageable by morning. The brain, during the dream state, is not passively reviewing. It is actively processing, separating the information from the feeling that came with it, archiving the event, releasing the pain. Ancient humans had the same REM architecture you do, the same cycles, the same processing mechanism running in the dark. Every night something in their brain was reviewing what had hurt that day, what had scared them, what they had lost, and then projecting it onto the screen behind their closed eyes, in full sensory detail. They didn't know the mechanism. They just knew that in the night they went somewhere, and they came back different, sometimes wiser, sometimes with something to say. They thought the dream was a visit. We know it is a process. Neither answer explains why it feels like being somewhere real. Think about this. Every major civilization that ever existed, independently, across every continent with no contact between them, developed a belief in two worlds, the waking world and another one, the spirit world, the underworld, the realm of the ancestors, the land of the dead. The names are different, the rituals are different, the theologies are completely different. The structure is identical. That is not coincidence. It is not cultural borrowing. These civilizations never met. They arrived at the same conclusion because they were all running the same brain, every night, experiencing the same thing, and drawing the same conclusion about what it meant. Something in the human mind is built to believe that consciousness can leave and return, that the dead continue somewhere, that the night contains information the day cannot provide. We have answered the how, the firing neurons, the acetylcholine levels, the suppressed motor cortex so you don't physically run when something is chasing you. We can describe the mechanism in precise detail. We cannot explain the experience. We cannot explain why it feels like being somewhere, why the dead come back with the right voice and the right hands, why certain dreams feel more real than anything that happened while you were awake. The how is solved. The why is 430,000 years old and completely open. Tonight, you're going to close your eyes. Your motor cortex will be chemically switched off. Your visual cortex will activate as if you're actually seeing. Your amygdala will run hotter in some phases than it does in full waking consciousness, processing fear and grief and love simultaneously, and you will go somewhere. Same as the people who carried their dead to the bottom of a dark shaft in northern Spain 500,000 years ago. Same as the painter who pressed their hand against the rock in Chauvet and saw a bison become a man. Same as the person who woke beside a dying fire in the Kalahari Desert and said to the person next to them, "I saw him last night. He was by the river. He seemed at peace." You inherited the dream from all of them. Every cell in your sleeping brain is ancient hardware running an ancient process, generating the same visions that made the first humans certain there was another world beyond this one. The only difference between you and them is that you'll wake up and check your phone before the dream has time to mean anything. They waited by the fire and told someone, and someone listened. The cave walls are still there.